Welcome back, everybody, to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course, we continue to prepare for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take the KVM hypervisor that we've installed that we're looking at right here through the Virtual Machine Manager, and we're actually going to install a version of Linux. Now, offline, I downloaded an ISO image from Ubuntu, and that's just because Ubuntu 14.04 is a LTS release and should have the widest support in terms of any virtual system because it's been around for quite some time. So we're going to go ahead and install that. We'll walk through the different system settings that we have, and then we'll complete the installation and make sure that we can log into the system. So we're going to go ahead and click here. We've got the Virtual Machine Manager connected to the local host, our QEMU or Hardware Virtualization Hypervisor on our local system. And if we hit Create New Virtual Machine, we're going to tell it to install from local install medium. Right here, we're going to leave the architecture at x86-64 and the firmware at default. We could switch to UEFI, but then we'd also have to worry about the UEFI signature insertion into our secure ring. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and leave it at default, which will treat this more or less like a BIOS type of system, which should boot right from the CD-ROM. So let's go ahead and go forward here. We can either use the existing CD-ROM. In other words, if I had a physical disk that I had inserted into my machine that had the image that I wanted to install from, I could use the CD or DVD on the system. In this case, I'm going to use the ISO image and browse to its location. Now, there's a couple of things to know. If this is the first time you've run it, you'll see actually nothing here, and you'd have to go to Browse Local and pick out the ISO. And then what it'll do is it'll add it to the appropriate storage pool for the volumes that are available to install from. So in this case, we're going to choose Ubuntu 14.04, and we're going to choose the volume that we want to install. Now, the operating system that we're going to use is Linux, and the version, let's go back and pick 14.04 LTS, and we'll move forward. Here's where we can indicate the amount of memory. Now, I have on this system 12 gigabytes of memory, and I have an i7 processor with hyperthreading, which means that I've got up to 8 available and up to 12 gigabytes available on the host, minus the OS overhead that is currently being used. In this case, let's just go ahead and use 2048 or 2 gigabytes of memory, and we'll use 2 CPUs for our system. We'll go back later on and we'll show you how you can make that an adjustment if you want to use something less or something more. Now, we're going to enable storage for this virtual machine, creating a disk image on the computer's hard drive of what size. This tells us that I currently have 200 gigabytes of space available. I could also select from a managed or other storage device. So if I've got something here in my images file system directory, or browsing locally, or I could create a new volume if I wanted to control how that volume is created, but we're just going to accept the defaults here. But we are going to create an 18 gigabyte partition. That way I know that even though 8 gigs should be enough to install Ubuntu 14.04, we may need a little bit more space than that. So we'll go ahead and go forward from here. We can name our system however we want. So let's name this Ubuntu 14.04 LTS. The OS is Ubuntu 14.04 LTS or Trusty Tar. It's being installed from the local CD-ROM. The memory is 2 gigabytes, CPU of 2, and the storage of 18. Now, you can customize the configuration before the install, as well as looking at some of the advanced options. Now, we're going to use our virtual network because the virtual network is the NAT or the bridged adapter address that we created when we installed. We could also indicate that we wanted to attach directly to the host device, our EN01 device, which would give us, if our network is set up for DHCP, it would give us the ability to assign an IP address directly to that system, so that it would have an IP address on the same network as our physical host. In this case, let's go ahead and use NAT and make sure that what we have set up works correctly. We'll go ahead and hit finish here. And the name of our system can't contain a period. So let's just say Ubuntu Trusty Tar and hit finish. And now what it's doing is it's creating a domain from within the virtual machine can be launched, as well as creating the image that is necessary for the virtual machine to launch within. Now we can try Ubuntu without installing, or we can install Ubuntu. So if we want to make sure that our image boots, we can just go ahead and try Ubuntu without installing. Because if anybody's installed Ubuntu either in a virtually or on a physical system before, you'll know that when you install Ubuntu this way, it boots to a live desktop that we can then choose a install Ubuntu from. So while this boots up, I'll go ahead and pause this video and we'll be right back. All right, we've booted to the desktop here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is you'll notice that this default size is going to be smaller than the actual screen itself. So let's see if we can expand this. And because we can scroll around, but what we want to do is we want to make this a little bit bigger so we can actually use this desktop. So we're going to go ahead and close the keyboard shortcuts. We'll do install Ubuntu 14.04.3 LTS, which will install the LTS version of Ubuntu Trusty Tar. So I can either right click and click on open, or I can double click the install. Now, right now, this is operating in, it's not unaccelerated mode, but it's running from the ISO image from within a VM. So it's going to be a little bit pokey until we get the actual virtual machine installed. So if it takes a moment for this to come up, especially if you happen to be running this off of a CD, just be patient with it. It will come up. So we're going to go ahead and install in English. We'll let download updates and third-party software be installed during the install process. And all we're doing here is we're running through the install process for Ubuntu the same way that we would if we were installing it in VirtualBox, VMware, whether it's Workstation or ESX, or with any other virtual solution. So let's go ahead and do something else here. We'll partition our drive, select what we have, new partition table, which will create free space that I can install from. Let's go ahead and create a 2 GB swap. And then finally, from whatever free space is left, we'll create a slash so that we have a root file system. We'll go ahead and let the block device mount of dev VDA be where the device bootloader is loaded from. And then we'll go ahead and click install now. We'll indicate that we want to go ahead and finish the formatting and partitioning process, and then it should move to the installation. Now, in just a moment, I'll go ahead and pause this so that it can complete the installation, but from a virtual manager perspective, this should all be relatively familiar to anybody who's not only installed Ubuntu before, but is installed anything inside of any type of virtual system or a physical system. All we're doing is going through the exact same process that we would go through if we were installing this anywhere else. Let's set up our test user. And we'll let it name it whatever, our test username, our password, and we'll go ahead and continue. And we'll go ahead and let it finish the install. So once this install is finished, I'll come back and we'll complete the install and take a look at our booted system. Okay, so we've completed our installation, and we can see that the test standard PC i440FX P2X 1996, this is an indication of the initial hardware that it's running, a 440FX chipset, P2X 1996 BIOS. None of that really makes any difference. It's just a way that the host name was configured automatically, since we didn't indicate a host name when we started up. So we should be able to put in the password that we created during installation, and we can see that Ubuntu is booting up here. So again, if we look here on our system where we have this running, we do a uname -a, and we see we're running Ubuntu 4.2027, just so that we're verifying that we are running two different operating systems from within our installation. We start up a terminal here, and we do a uname -a, which happens to be running kernel 3.19, which is indicative of the type of kernel and version that was running when Ubuntu 14.04 LTS was created. So at this point, we can interact with the virtual machine like we would with any other virtual machine on our network. If we do an ifconfig, let's see that it's been given an IP address, and that IP address is 192.168.122, which is the same IP range. If we do an ifconfig that is attached to our VIR BR0, so our bridge adapter 192.168.122.1, that also likely means that I should be able to ping 161, ping 192.168.122.161, and I can, because I've got forwarding enabled as part of my network bridge adapter configuration. And finally, if I come back over here, I should be able to ping google.com, which tells me that I'm actually getting out, and my NAT address translation from my bridged address to my normal internet address, we've configured that correctly on our system so that our host and our virtual guests can communicate, and it can route that traffic in and out. So installing a Linux operating system as a guest from within KVM is actually really straightforward, especially using the virtual machine manager. We're going to learn how to interact with these virtual machines, both from within the virtual manager as well as at the command line, in our next couple of videos. But for installing a Linux operating system as a guest OS on our KVM hypervisor, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.